Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. And I feel like I've been in church. This is the second service already. And just like church, it's time to eat real soon, right? So we're not gonna hold y'all long. Congratulations on such a wonderful film. Let's give him one more hand on that.
I think that working good.
Yeah, there's so much to praise in it, so much that you have given us to think about. Not only if we just think about the main subject, Madam Smith, we learned that we learned a lot about what comprised this gospel music tradition. She was an impresario. She was a curator. She was a talent scout. She was an educator. She was a singer. She was a businesswoman. She was a mother. She was a wife. And the list just goes on and on and on about what we learn about this gospel tradition, particularly through the life of a woman. I thought that was one of the most profound gifts of this film was the whole gender piece. Because we don't think about a lot of times that the gospel tradition, although we call Thomas Dorsey the father, and many of the directors and arrangers and composers may have been men, but women were just as important, if not more important to this tradition and sustaining it. The entire audience, the entire choir was pretty much comprised of women. If you could answer this question to begin, your film moved so well between the spectacular and the intimate. We saw that power of the gospel, tradition, and then we also saw through that film the most intimate settings. And I'd like to know, as a young filmmaker, what was it like? How did you get these people to agree to have you follow them while they're cooking eggs? Or on the grandest stage? That's the first thing I'd like to.
Well, first of all, I was very young at the time, and Mother Smith took to me. So did Thomas Dorsey. They embraced me. They brought me into their family, and I became a part of their family, very, very close. Spent a whole year before we shot a single frame. I was following them around with a still camera. I wanted to get them used to having a camera around them. Mm-hmm. And also, for me, it was a way of visually depicting them, taking pictures, getting a sense of how the film would look. And so it was a combination of me being around. There was always a still camera.
Right.
But also, there was also a personal relationship. And being embraced so much by Mother Smith enabled other people to embrace me as well. The Barrett Sisters, the O'Neill twins, that the level to which we had this intimate feeling enabled other people to trust me as well. But, spending a year before filming, enabled me to really get a sense of also what I wanted to film. We shot that film in 15 days.
Wow.
And there was only one scene we didn't use. One scene with the Barrett Sisters sitting around a piano table. Every other scene we used. Mm-hmm. Every scene we used, except for that one scene. Okay. So I was very clear about what I was looking for when I was filming at that point. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, naturally, everything that happened in the film that you witness, I wasn't prepared for Keith, Mother Smith's grandson, saying what he said about how he felt about women preaching. I didn't know that he felt that way, and Mother Smith didn't know he felt that way. And you could see the authenticity of that moment mm-hmm. when she talks about that. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want Keith in the film. She wanted him in the film. She insisted that he be in the film and that he be in that scene with her. She insisted that Zella be in the film. I didn't want Zella in the film. But for me, it was a collaboration. I wasn't going to tell her I wouldn't put them in the film because she was my collaborator. I was there to work with her, not resist her. I was there to try to help communicate who she was, try to be a messenger, so to speak, for her. That was my role as a filmmaker, to try to take the experience that I was having with them as I had spent this time and try to communicate it through film, so an audience could then feel the same love that I was feeling for them. I mean, for me, that's a success. Now, I couldn't communicate a feeling as if I had grown up in the church, but I could communicate the feeling of, here's what I had experienced, and here's the intimacy of what I felt. Frank and Delois, when they get into the argument, I knew that they had that. When I arrived, I knew what I was going for from that scene, but they already had breakfast. So I said, well, you're going to have to have breakfast again. And so Delois started cooking, and I just whispered in Frank's ear, talk about how you feel about Delois traveling with her sisters. That's all I needed to say.
He said gladly.
Well, no, you have to understand, my role as a filmmaker is to make sure when the cameras are rolling, something's worthy of happening, filming is happening. Otherwise, what am I doing there?
Right.
So I take an active role in creating an environment where people can be who they are. It's not, I don't take a passive role. I don't manipulate, but I take an active role in a very real, genuine way and respectful way. So in that thing, I planted the seed. I had no idea that Frank was going to take it to the extent that he did. That, he wanted her to stop traveling with her sisters. I mean, my God, I never thought that he would say that.
Well, patriarchy is a hell of a drug. What I love about those scenes, though, although they may have been a little uncomfortable, what I took away from the grandson, he was stating what, first of all, many people felt and probably still feel. So it was a great way to open that up in the film in a kind of organic way. But I thought even more so than that when they sat around that family table, I bet that grandson learned his part. He was singing right in the choir. So no matter what tensions were around that whole scene, at the end of the day, I saw a strong family. And I saw a matriarch at the head who was really able to, still pass down that tradition to him, although he may have had his own ideas about it.
Without a doubt. Mm-hmm. He is there with pride on stage with her. You can see it in his face. Do you have any feelings about that? Because talk a little bit about that, what that family scene and how, the church, the relationship of the religion of it, and what was happening, and their, how the church and mother's rejection from that church and all that. You had some interesting things to say about that.
Yeah, so I think it's a fabulous production. There's so many different beautiful tensions that are captured in the production. The generational tensions, the tensions between kind of religion and culture, these tensions that you see between new forms of gospel music that they feel threatened by, contemporary gospel music. I love the line when you get I can't tell the O'Neill twins apart, but one of them says that we're living in some kind of hit record society. Where he is clearly reacting to new forms of gospel music. That they clearly feel, it seems like a shared feeling, that it's compromising the integrity of the message. We see in especially, I think, so marvelously embodied in Mother Smith, this idea of the preacher, that she talks about her work as evangelism, as mission, as laboring for souls. You see all of that, and then of course the scene with the Barrett sister and Frank, when they have this, to see him in the church service, right, where he's getting happy, right, and then to go home and he's getting an attitude with his wife because because of her ministry. I thought that was beautifully captured, and it really kind of humanized this man of the Spirit that you see in the scene at the altar when he's leading the woman to Christ.
Yeah, I love in the film that dichotomy that's set up between the commercial and the spiritual. Although, and what's fascinating to me about it is that I think that from the very beginning that embodied what gospel music was all about. Because after all, when Thomas Dorsey, quote unquote, invented it, the first thing he did was to start publishing sheet music to sell it. And Sally Martin, who seemed to be all about that paper, she started, they were throwing those dimes in. She said, hey, wait a minute, we could, she said, and you're living off of it today, but the work I did. So I think that tension arises throughout the history of gospel music. It happened in the 40s when Mahalia Jackson became the first million, seller. Her record, Move On Up a Little Higher, I think, was the first quote unquote gospel million seller. And then when Edwin Hawkins came out in the 60s, there's always this, and then when Kurt Franklin came out with Stomp, it's just this continuation of this tension between money and God.
Yeah, and then she also herself talks about the problem she had bringing her form of music into the church. Yeah. So the same thing that they're critiquing, the same cycle that they're critiquing, they're also participating in. And so it's a cycle that never ends.
Yes, yes. I love that scene where she's coaching the young man singing. And she's trying to show him how through the cavity and how you place the mouth, what you do with the cheeks, where the air should be, which, by the way, when she sung after him, you saw all that support that she had, that even when she was tossing it off in a lesson setting, the vibrato was perfect, the pitch was perfect, she kept that note going as long as she wanted to, just a true master. At that thing, did you have to prompt her? Do you remember?
No. It's quite interesting. That was a scene. That was capturing the Soloist Bureau, which she led. That was a scene that was happening. We had nothing to do with setting that up. That there was somebody singing. We filmed a number of singers, but this particular singer was the one that was the most, the one that stood out in it. Mm-hmm. But I love the way she says, you can't be pretty mouth and sing, and I think of, a lot of, I remember there was an opera singer that I forget her name, but she did not want to be photographed certain ways because she didn't like the way her mouth looked.
Is it Jesse Norman?
No, it wasn't Jesse Norman. Herbie Hancock's Gershwin's World. She was singing on that. Anyway, she was very sensitive about the way she was filmed. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting with Mother Smith, you can't be pretty mouth and sing. She's letting go of that. Yeah. She's saying, you should not be pretty mouth. You shouldn't be concerned about that. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And then she talks about it in terms of high class, low class. Yeah, it's all about the words. Understanding the words, maybe you could talk a little bit about that. How important, what is she referring to about that from her point of view? What is she really expressing about how her perception of the music and how it should be presented?
So I thought of when I first saw it, Du Bois's notion of the three essentials of Negro religion. Okay. The preacher, the music, and the frenzy of shouting. Mm-hmm. In gospel music, everything comes together. Yes. You see, in this idea that you're pointing at about the message, that the message needs to come out of your mouth, and there should be concern about how you say what needs to be said because you're preaching. Of course, and then also the music is all through it. And then the way in which and I thought that you did a marvelous job at allowing us to see the ways in which the people, the congregation and the singers embody the Spirit, and how their bodies are vessels that experience the Spirit. But the other piece that I think is so striking to me is what I like to call the kind of spontaneous ecumenicity that you see within gospel music. At the time this film was recorded, there are very sharp divisions between black denominations. But in this video, you see Thomas Dorsey, who's a Baptist. You see Willie Mae Ford Smith, who is an apostolic, PAW. And then, of course, you see the O'Neill twins that are Church of God in Christ. And this choir that the O'Neill twins have put together, which interesting is called not the ecumenical choir, the interfaith choir, is that you see all of the denominations who have very sharp theological differences. They critique each other, but in the power of the music, that all of them come together. They all experience the Spirit together. And I think that same thing is today. You don't see these kind of fights and stuff like that. Everybody listens to Fred Hammond. Everybody listens to John P. Key. Everybody's singing Smallwood. But music, I think, is a way that we can get past all of our divisions and work together. I think that's carried out very well.
Indeed. You know, I had your idea about how many traditions gospel music could absorb is very poignant. Did you check out when how Thomas Dorsey moved between this kind of bel canto sound where he's like, oh, and then but when he talked, when he interjected, he did that thing and knew precisely what he wanted, that he had kind of mastered all of those different things. And then Willie Mae Ford Smith had the definitely that gospel growly kind of tone. And then the Barrett Sisters are just like the Emotions, you know, with the 3-part harmony just soaring above the sky. So do you think, I do agree with you that at the time that this was filmed, there were divisions, because there was some Sundays that I went from the United Methodist Church at 8 o'clock service. Then I had another job at the Baptist Church at 11 o'clock. And then by the time I finished that, the Pentecostal Church of God in Christ, they were just in testimony service by the time you get there, right? And speaking of these, as an accompanist, as a pianist, I had to learn how to play What a Friend We Have in Jesus, so I could keep my job in the Methodist Church. You couldn't have it too jazzy. To keep your job in the Baptist, you had to put a little, thing into it. And then with the Kojic, you had to do it like for half an hour, whatever you were playing. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So do you think that those divisions are still present in terms of, people think black people are all the same, black churches are all the same, but you're right, there are different traditions within these things. And so what do you think about that?
Yeah, so now this is what I think about that now. I think that if you ask like a Baptist purist or a Kojic purist about theological kinds of nuances, that they'll tell you that this is one of the problems that we opened up and now we got all this stuff coming in. But I think that given the transient nature of musicians in churches,
yes,
that it has influenced. You might start out playing for this church, then these folks at the next church, they offer you $30 more on a Sunday, so you go over here,
right,
and you take all of the stuff that formed you with you.
Yes.
And so I think that musicians are moving around, organists are moving around, choir directors are moving around, but also ministers now are moving around. You have Presbyterians who say that we like, there's an enthusiasm that Pentecostals bring to ministry. We just got to get them to seminary. But we would rather have a seminary-trained Pentecostal than a seminary-trained Pentecostal to be our pastor as a Presbyterian church than a person who is born, bred, and will be dead Presbyterian. So you have that happening at the music level, but then you have it happening at the congregational leadership level. And so it's really a mixed bag. And you almost have to ask a person, you know, where are you from?
Right.
To find out where they're from, because musicians are borrowing chords from each other and being influenced by music, by mass and music and mass culture.
Right.
So it's changing.
Yeah.
It's really changing.
And it's changed a lot since Thomas Dorsey had to sell that sheet music, because what if the choirs didn't have phonographs?
Exactly. And one wonder that I have is if there is a literature that has emerged that captures what's happening in gospel music, I haven't found that literature yet. I think that the literature, gospel music has changed so fast that the scholarship hasn't even caught up with it.
Well, I do know a couple of scholars who are doing really great work. Alicia Jones, at Indiana University.
Sean Crawley.
Sean Crawley, yeah, so we're on film. Okay, I shouted y'all out.
Yes, and they and I know both of them very fine scholars. But, but in mass, you know, people like Ty Tribbett and, you know, you wonder who's capturing that.
Oh, they're writing about it, but it probably tends to be more in journalism, because the scholars, you know, as it took George a year to even start filming, you know, to just hang out and find out, okay, this is what this film can be about. And I think because, you know, the musicians never, as we know, the musicians never stop working. Somebody's writing something that we haven't heard of in the basement right now, if you just listen. And it's almost impossible for scholars to keep up. But these people are trying, you know, they're really trying to run after. One last question, and then we'll open it up. This has to do with your job as a curator of religion at the, we call it the Blacksonian here in Philadelphia.
I've heard it called that before.
Yeah, right. And you as a curator, because when you put together a film, you're making choices, you know, about what's in and what's out. And so as curators, what do you think in your present role, first of all, as the curator of religion for the museum, what in that film resonated with what you do on a daily basis in your job as you train the world about, you know, black religion in the United States?
Yeah, I just think that the diversity that was demonstrated within the film is very powerful. I think that these traditions of embodiment of and bodily kind of exercises of religion, the diversity of musical styles, the kind of generational diversity. That I just think it's a marvelous, and of course the ecumenical diversity. I think it's a marvelous witness to the diversity of the black church, the diversity that's within black religion, the different traditions that run through individuals, the influences and the kinds of interests that people have. I think that it's a marvelous piece, and I hope that more of the world can get to see it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, also I think there's one thing that really stood out for me when I was making the film is the notion of family, the solidity of the African American family. Mother's family was so tight, so close-knit, so devoted to one another. And it's interesting because you see the family from all the various different perspectives. You see Mother Smith in relationship to what she feels about her husband and how he gave her a hard time. And yet you hear her kids talk about he was her biggest fan. He was her manager. He supported her. You talk about the kids, Mother Smith talking to Zell about this train station and the kids crying. And then you hear the kids in the train station, finally, in the end, in that moment, talking about the mother leaving and how everybody thought she was such a big star. And you see this picture of her, which makes you feel it. You see this family unit, such a solid family unit of family values And then you see the Barrett sisters, 3 sisters that have worked together, created a career together, the solid relationship, the O'Neill twins, and then you have Thomas Dorsey and his bigger family, the convention, all those people that respect him. And so I think the idea of family is such a solid theme throughout the film. And so that was just one of the things that I mean, I don't know, just from my perspective, it was such a thing that I respected so much about them.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Maybe time. Is James here?
Yeah, right here.
Yeah. How long you want to go here?
Not too long. Let's take about 3 questions.
Okay, 3 questions, please.
I love the film. It's very, very well done. What about distribution?
Well, the film is still playing in theaters around the country. It's playing in San Diego and Santa Fe, and it was in California. So it's just finished in New York. And so it's still playing. It's going to be in Atlanta, and then it will be available for churches, nonprofits, and places like that. And then it will be released on Blu-ray. So if anybody wants to find out more about it, just go to sayamensomebody.com. And just, you can find out where it's playing and things like that. So eventually it will be available.
Yeah, congratulations on getting it out now, because we're in a renaissance of films about black music. The Miles Davis film was here last week. It was just awesome. The new, by Stanley Nelson, that new documentary. They called him Morgan, or I called him Morgan, about Lee Morgan, and then searching for John Coltrane. This is just a great, great moment. I'm so happy your film is coming back around. Yes?
Were you influenced at all by the Aretha Franklin documentary they did in gospel?
No, I mean, was I influenced by it?
Yeah.
Well, no, that came later. Yeah, so I didn't even know about that, and my film preceded that entirely, and so, yeah.
Please.
I just wanted to know why you were drawn to this subject matter.
Well, it's interesting. I had made a film on black jazz tap dancing before this, with Sandman Sims, Bunny Briggs, and Chuck Green, and it was very successful, and it opened at the Telluride Film Festival, and it got a standing ovation, and the film created a renaissance in black jazz tap dancing, and we created a traveling show. The dancers from the film travel with the film. The film would be the first part of the show, and then they'd come out, and audiences were blown away. They'd get a standing ovation for just walking out, and this is the first time in their lives that this ever happened, because tap dancers are generally opening acts. So they became very famous worldwide, and their careers took off. So after that, I was with a musician by the name of Ry Cooder. And some may know him, some may not, but I asked him if he had any ideas. And he said, his exact words were, "You ought to look into gospel music. Those cats are really neat." Well, I'd never been to a black church in my life, never heard gospel music. I just started going, and naturally I was totally drawn to it and very comfortable, and felt like this is my next film.
Well, I don't know about you. For some reason, I feel like I want some ham, macaroni and cheese, and some greens, and some skillet cornbread. So, good luck for y'all getting it. Thank you very much. Let's give George another big round of applause. Dr. Williams. Hey, man, this is a beautiful, beautiful film, and it sounds so good.